Hello, and welcome to Mind Your Head, a space for people to share their stories, talk openly and honestly about their own mental health challenges, and to give some listeners some comfort in knowing you're not alone. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we record this podcast, the Gubbi Gubbi people. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Indigenous peoples. We honour their enduring connection to the land, waters and culture, and recognise their invaluable contributions they make to our communities. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. This episode is proudly supported by True Protein. Use the code MindYourHead at the checkout to score $25 off your next order. Ray, welcome to Mind Your Head. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on today. I've always wanted to get a psychologist on, and it's worked out perfectly that you've come on. And I guess one of the big reasons is a lot of the stories that me and the guests talk about always sort of translate back to what they were like as kids, and it affects them sort of growing up as adults. So thank you very much for coming on. Long time no see as well.
I know. Thanks for having me. It's a different experience, but give it a go. See how it goes.
So I think probably for the listeners, just give a little bit about your background, what you specialise in, and what was the sort of the driving force of becoming a psychologist?
Yeah, I feel like I was one of those lucky kids leaving school. I always knew I wanted to go into this general field, helping people and working with young people in particular. So going into uni, I was fortunate to be able to start in a degree where I could just trial a lot of different subjects in the allied health space. And then as soon as I started with psych, it stuck. For anyone that is studying psychology or knows someone in that space, it's a bit of a process and a journey to get your registration. But I was lucky at the time I was going through it. When I completed my honours at UQ, I was given the opportunity to start an internship, and at the time that was one of the pathways that you could go to gain your registration. So I was able to jump straight into the workforce instead of doing my master's. So, I did about 2 years of an internship working in the field of children and paediatrics mainly. But as part of your registration, you have to be able to work across the lifespan. So that's kind of how I got there.
So how did you, what was the reason sort of focusing on sort of adolescents, children and kids and stuff?
I don't know. Hey, I think I just have always wanted to work with kids. Yeah. In my head, it was always going to be easier working with kids than it would be with adults.
Okay. And has that panned out?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
It's just a different experience.
Yeah.
And I think, growing up, I played a lot of sport and then I did a lot of coaching with young people, and that was always the space I was interested in. I found I was able to connect with a lot of young people as a young adult myself. So that's kind of how I found myself in that space.
Awesome. So we've got a few questions today.
Yeah.
I was telling you before, I'm trying not to make it at my own personal therapy session. And then we've also got a few questions that people have sent in, other sort of listeners have sent in that they've wanted to ask you as well. So I think this is also good that there might be like a narrative or a misconception around going to a psychologist is this daunting, scary thing, but it doesn't have to be like that at all. Not as scary as coming on a podcast.
No, not as scary as coming on a podcast, can confirm.
Yeah. There is that sort of narrative around that, people would often not want to go see a psychologist because it's how, confronting or vulnerable it is.
Yeah, absolutely. There's huge stigma around going to see a psychologist. And I get it. It's scary. All of a sudden you have to sit in front of a stranger and tell them your whole life story and you don't know them. It is. You've got to be really vulnerable. But I think there are so many benefits to it in having a separate space, someone different from family or friends that you can speak to that can provide a different perspective. We were kind of chatting a little bit before that, you don't go to therapy to be fixed. You're not broken, and I think that's a really big feeling lots of people have. And it's more just how can we create change? Something in your life, whatever that is, isn't, making you feel at your best. So how can we get you back there?
And that's the thing, It's it's very difficult trying to put feelings to emotions and that sort of thing. And something that I struggled with was I didn't like talking to someone that I knew because I felt like, and they did, and it's a natural response for them to feel or treat you differently, have that sympathy or, draw it Elliot. And I'm like, oh, that's like makes it worse when you like treat me differently.
Yeah.
And I found so much better going to see a psychologist, a stranger, someone I had good relationship with, good rapport with. But I knew that they weren't going to lose sleep over me.
No.
They could just finish their job, and I knew that they weren't going to worry about me. Whereas I felt like when I was chatting to chatting to my friends or family, their natural response was, that sympathy. They start treating you differently, and that almost adds to the feeling that you're different.
Yeah.
Yeah,
all of a sudden your friends like have your phone number and they text you and they check in on you, and whereas your psychologist isn't doing that. I would say they absolutely are caring about you and thinking about you more than you think
what
they
I mean?
are. But then you kind of develop skills and ways to leave work at work and be able to move forward. And
has that been hard for you?
At the start was so hard, like especially working with kids.
Yeah.
And I was like, there are so many kids I just want to like pick up and take home
give a hug.
and show them what like a predictable environment is or a calm environment could be when their whole life feels like chaos. So I think it's something I've definitely gotten better at. I think time is just a huge part of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
what are your tactics or tools to sort of leave it at work? Is it because I've chatted to a few people and they say as soon as they get home they change clothes.
Yeah.
Like get out of their sort of clothes to sort of break that mold of like this is work time or home time. They just get straight out of their work clothes.
Yeah. Exercise is a big one for me, and moving and doing something. Whether it's getting home and going for a run or going for a walk, just doing something to physically think about something else.
Yeah.
Sometimes I will have a debrief after work, and that can be really helpful. And I think in the private practice I'm in, there's a real emphasis on checking in with people before they leave, making sure everything's kind of sorted before you head home. So you don't need to then take your work.
Dwell on it or anything like that.
Yeah.
So let's get into the first couple of questions, mainly about, the kids and their, kids that are struggling with their mental health and the ways and the signs to look out for. So what are some common early signs that a child is struggling with their mental health that parents often overlook?
It's so varied.
Is it?
So varied. It can, and depending on the type of presentation you're looking at, it can come in emotional dysregulation and outbursts. And I guess the difference is, everyone has outbursts.
Yeah, and how can you tell the difference whether it's normal behaviours and then also red flags?
Yeah, and I guess it's, if it's a one-off or it happens every now and then is normal. Kids are going to get frustrated. They're learning to navigate their world. Things don't go as they want. They're going to get frustrated. Okay, we manage that and we move on. If it's prolonged and it persists and it's over everything, or you feel like there's no point where they kind of down regulate, or quite often they go from 0 to 100. I was like, well, they're not ever at 0. So I guess it's just like how long it persists. Same with like if a young person is really sad or withdrawn, and we're looking at more of a depression presentation, it's, well, how long has that been like that? Is it just they've had a sad week? Is it it's been months that they haven't wanted to do things?
Yeah, right.
Lots of, and I guess the neurodivergent space then creeps in, and that can manifest differently as well. But yeah, I guess it really just how long has it been presenting for, and what's the impact then on that young person and their family and their support network.
Yeah, and you talked about sort of just before that kids are in an environment where it's just absolute chaos, right? And the word sort of trauma gets thrown around a lot, where I think a lot of people, associate trauma with, abuse, physical abuse, but trauma can also be emotional, not showing that love or attention, or not being there for someone, and not having that, kids not feeling seen or heard. How does that affect a child long term if it goes, unprocessed?
Yeah, and I think that's where attachment can really come into it. And, parents hang on to their own kind of traumas, whatever that may be, and it's not necessarily immediately passed down onto their children, but, you know, if the parent's not in a space where they can provide that nurture or the connection that that young person needs, they then take that and go, oh, I'm not worthy of that love. So then all of a sudden they start pushing people away at school, or they start to, you know, become frustrated, and they might become the bully because they're not getting something that they need at home. You know, it can look so different.
So different.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you talked about just then that, you know, passing down from parent, and that's something that I was very cautious of, because I know that sort of my father went through a terrible childhood with a lot of alcohol abuse, drug abuse, you know, physical abuse, that when he became a father, he wanted to change those things.
Yeah.
But I think there was a emotional side from Dad's childhood that he never healed from. That he just he did the best he could with what he knew. Like that, all that sort of knowledge back then and education, I don't think was around. So Dad wanted to change those physical things about him being a dad, but I think those emotional traumas that I think he's still dealing with now as a 70-year-old, he hasn't sort of dealt with. And I think a lot of that stuff has filtered down to my brothers and I, where we're sort of, I don't know, you know, might be a tricky question too, but, you know, I think a lot of my brothers have all gone through similar anxiety, depression symptoms. But the tricky thing is that we've all had such safe childhoods.
Yeah.
You know, nowhere near compared to what Dad went through. Such safe, loving childhoods. Yet all of us have at some point in our lives experienced high levels of anxiety and depression. And I'm thinking, where does that come from?
Yeah. And
how does that manifest?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so much is environmental. Like you said, you can have the safest, loving childhood and still experience mental health challenges. You could be in a really successful career and still experience mental health challenges. Like it's one of those ones, like no one is safe. Like it doesn't discriminate in that sense. But there is an element of it being genetics, right? And whilst there's still lots of like research that goes into it, and no one can safely and certainly say, you know, well, if this person has anxiety or depression, you're definitely going to have it. But it's there. It's an element of your genetics and your makeup. That's why, like, at a lot of intakes, people do ask about parental and like so maternal and paternal mental health. Yeah. Like, is there a history of this in your family? You know, that might change how they respond to you. And it's not necessarily that you weren't loved or didn't have a roof over your head and weren't safe, but, you know, how they responded in certain situations might be kind of a reason why it manifests for you. Because
that was like, I think when I got to a point when I was like 30, I realized that I want to be a dad. And I never really thought about being a father or, you know, fatherhood at all during my 20s. And I thought, if I don't get my shit together, you know, I won't be the best dad I could possibly be. You know, I think I take, you know, fatherhood so seriously, and I think it would be a disservice to my kids if I don't start, you know, working on a number of things that I knew were issues with me. Because I was really, really afraid, and I still am, to be honest with you, I still am afraid that I'll pass something on to my kids that I struggled with. And I always think now, because I struggled a lot, and I always think now that I'm like, oh, I really don't want them to go through what I went through. Yeah. I'm like, how do I fix it? You know, how do I not let that happen? Yeah. And it's something that I talk about now, and I'm trying to do the most I can at this present point to not pass anything on. And I read a lot of Gabor Mate, and I think he's the man. I went and watched him.
I was going to say, he was here not so long ago, wasn't he?
Yeah, so I went and saw him. And I was going to ask him a question. I was in line to ask him a question, but a lady already asked the exact same question I was going to ask, was how do I not pass traumas down to my kids? And the first thing he said was, you know, are you doing the work now before kids? Yeah. And the lady's like, yeah, I am. He's like, keep doing it. Yeah. He's like, if you want to be the best dad, you got to be the best you. Yeah. You know, and like, he said to the lady, he's like, but how do you know that's going to be enough? And he's like, it won't be. There's no such thing as perfect parenting. you know?
Absolutely.
Everyone stuffs up.
Yeah.
And she was like, but I don't want to stuff up. He's like, get used to it because we're all going to stuff up.
Absolutely.
But if you can like now prepare yourself and do all the stuff that you need to do, become a better version of yourself, then that's going to filter down to you being a better parent. So they gave me some sort of closure to know that I'm on the right track.
Yeah, and I think I did a training last year maybe with a lady named Dr. Karen Treisman. She's from the UK. She's a clinical psychologist and does a lot of work in the trauma space. And one of her big take-home points, and I think this is a big thing for parents, because, you know, working with kids, you have to work with the parents. And the big take-home for me was well-being is well-doing. So we want well-being for our children and we want to set them up as best as we can. But if you can't do well by yourself, you're not going to be able to help them. So you need to look after yourself. You need to put the effort in and make the time for you to be as best as you can, and then that'll flow on.
That's always probably easier said than done.
Oh,
like we're not,
absolutely.
we're not parents, but I assume it can be very challenging trying to find time for yourself.
Yeah.
And fit in times to do whatever it is. You know, everyone's got their own things to make them the best version of themselves. But I can imagine even setting aside 30 or 40 minutes a day can be challenging when you've got kids running around the house.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, I get imposter syndrome a lot, and especially when I'm talking to parents and I'm like, oh, just try this, or, you know, get up that little bit earlier so you've got some you time. And I was like, I don't have kids. Yeah. Like, that must be like hectic for them.
Yeah.
Even, you know, seeing friends and family who have young kids, and, you know, I'll get the call and they'll be like, I'm so tired. I was like, oh, like, did your sleep routine not go well? Like, it's like I immediately go, well, this is what I know. I was like, I've never had to do that.
We can't relate.
No, I was like, I've never had to.
Yeah, I talk to my mate all the time because we used to go to the gym together heaps, but now he's got 2 kids and he comes every now and again. And he'll tell me, he's just like, I'll call him up. I'll give him like 30 minutes notice. He's like, dude, I need more than 30 minutes notice. And I was like, we're just going to the gym. It's around the corner. He goes, trust me, mate.
Yeah. It's a bit more than that.
It's a bit more than that. So it's interesting. I think we'll go through the same thing when we have children.
Yeah.
And we mentioned before that that co-regulation, emotional regulation, that's something that I can almost pinpoint that, you know, although that I was a, 27, 28, 29-year-old, I think looking back on it, I couldn't emotionally regulate at all. You know, I felt like, looking back on it now, it's quite embarrassing, but I felt like a little boy, even though that I was in my mid to late 20s, you know, almost a 30-year-old. I couldn't regulate my own emotions, you know, and I never was taught that. I don't know if it gets taught that now, but I was always, was like thinking anger was bad, or this emotion was bad, and I always like try to push it away. And I always associated these sort of emotions with being bad, not just being normal and healthy.
Yep.
And that was like a really big moment where I couldn't understand, like, why am I feeling like this? I couldn't put names to emotions. I couldn't put, what does that mean? I don't know why I'm feeling like this. So it was just a lot of like puzzle solving in my head where I couldn't know the answers. I didn't know how to solve the puzzle. How do you sort of teach that in young kids now? How to self-regulate and how to put sort of words to emotions and knowing what they mean, and it's okay.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing at the moment. I think schools do a really wonderful job now, with a big component being focused on regulation and mindfulness, and it's incorporated a lot more into their, I think, curriculum than it has ever been before. The amount of times I'll like talk about deep breathing, or
they do that at school.
Yeah.
Oh right.
Yeah, because our kids are about. I've already done this with my teacher. I'm like, okay.
That's like, the best.
So, it's so good. It's so good. So I think kids have access to multiple regulation points now during their day, which is amazing. But like you said, co-regulation is the number one thing for children. If like a parent isn't regulated, the child isn't going to be regulated. You know, how many times, and, I remember this from things I've experienced and things I've seen, but, yelling at a child, just calm down. I was like, that's not going to help them. That's
you're not calm.
No, you're not calm. They pick up on your energy. So it's so important for you to be able to regulate as the adult, to then sit with them, to be with them, whatever that is that they need in that moment. And regulation looks different for everybody. The amount of people that go, don't even tell me to take a deep breath, like that's not going to be helpful. And to an extent, I get that, but like taking deep breaths is the crux of any regulation you're going to do, whether it's mindfulness, whether it's exercise and movement, whether it's yoga, and it's the basis of everything. But yeah, co-regulation is it, whether you're the parent or the caregiver in that child's relationship, whether you're a teacher or just another safe adult that you happen to be in their presence for. Because like you said, you were in your 20s, not able to regulate. That's the same with parents, If you can't be regulated, how can your child be regulated at 5, 6, any age?
It's interesting when you look at that, when you see the parent sort of at the shopping centre or whatever it is that you see that, and you think, you're asking your child to do something that you actually can't do yourself. As simple as like, take a breath, be quiet.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Absolutely. And it's like, a big part of why modelling is so important for children, for like when a parent is getting escalated, which you will, they haven't listened to you, you've asked them 10 times, they won't have the bath, you're going to be at your end. But that's your time to be like, I'm feeling angry or I'm feeling frustrated. This is what I need to do to stay calm, so that the child can see, oh, my mum did that, or my dad does that.
Does a parent or caregiver, are they in the sessions with you with the child, or is it normally the child by?
It can vary.
Oh, it can vary.
Yeah, it can vary. I have some parents that'll come in and kind of give me a 5-10 minute update. They then leave and the child has their space, which I think once they reach a certain kind of point is super important for them to have that space without mum or dad sitting in the corner and kind
looking
of going,
over,
that's not what you did. So, but then there are also times where it's so important for the parent to be there and to experience the whole kind of journey with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go talk about sort of the adolescent brain, because I'm always interested to hear about how you deal with kids that are going through puberty, going through that stage of life. Everything's heightened.
Oh, yeah.
Emotions are heightened. Everything's like so intense. So what's actually happening to them at that point in their life that makes everything so intense, like life or death?
Yeah,
pretty much.
The big thing is that the emotion center of the brain, so your amygdala, is more developed than your prefrontal cortex, which is your impulse control, your kind of logical part of the brain. So all of a sudden you are reacting and you are reacting strong, and then by the time your brain has kind of time to catch up, it's like
it's too late.
It's too late. Yeah. And it's just as simple as that.
Yeah.
God, being a teenager seems like forever ago, but in this day and age as well, so different.
Well, and that's the thing, like there's so much more vices and temptations and everything out there, or distractions. You could say distractions probably a better word, that, we didn't grow up with social media. I didn't grow up in a world where I was getting bullied at all.
Yeah.
Especially going home and then sort of getting bullied. Continue at home, And that's such a, aspect of, I guess, what you do is like, how do you help the kids go through that period?
Oh, I don't like this period.
Oh, you don't?
All. I don't like it at all, because a lot of it comes in around screen time. Parents ask me questions about bullying, or kids are reporting bullying, or just not even bullying, like comparing themselves on social media, and it being this, platform where, we just want to be in competition, or, working towards presenting like we've got all of everything together, and it's not. But yeah, the bullying space and the social media space is so hard because it's still technically new. And you see now lots of conversations about changing, the ages, and
I think you should.
Absolutely.
18.
I think so. And I reckon if anyone I worked with saw this, would be like, oh, really? But the kids would hate it.
Yeah, the kids, yeah.
Oh my God. I couldn't imagine being an adolescent and not having it.
Yeah.
But then also knowing that it's not doing.
I think it does more harm than good. I think obviously the bullying side of it, but it's also like when you're a kid going through that puberty, going through that adolescent stage, you're trying to figure out who you are.
Oh.
You know, that whole identity crisis starts coming in and goes, you know, when you start sort of getting in high school and you're getting girlfriends, boyfriends, you're trying to figure out who you are, what your place is in the world. And then you've also got this screen that's telling you need to be this type of person, or this type of person gets popular or money or jobs or, you know, attention. And you think, well, that's how I got to model myself. Yeah. And then before you know it, like, you sort of lose yourself a bit. And I talk to a lot of parents all the time, and it's just like, you know, they're constantly battling the screen time because they've got your children more than you have at home. Yeah. You know?
Yep. And like, you know, even parents have to navigate it as well because, you know, they don't want their kids to be on it, but they're on it as well. And kids see that.
Monkey see, monkey do, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh,
especially with
like,
boys.
Yeah. And like, you know, parents need their downtime. And a lot of that is having a scroll, you know, or it might be listening to a podcast. The kid doesn't know that. All they see is you're on your phone. Why can't I be on mine?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's tricky. It's tricky. And like we went out for dinner with Jordan's bosses a couple of months ago, and they brought he would have been 8, she would have been 5 or something. And like whenever we're around sort of kids that age, it's iPad straight away, iPhone straight away, locked into a show or something. Yeah. They brought their kids, and this is a 7:00 dinner, and I was like, well, this is pretty late for two young kids. And they had a little suitcase or a bag of puzzles and colouring and stuff. And they sat at the table, didn't say a word, and they like did a puzzle, and he'll get up, tap his dad on the shoulder, another puzzle. Yeah. Dad's like, yeah, here you go. Does another puzzle. For like 2 or 3 hours we were at dinner.
It's incredible.
And then it got to like 9:00, and you could see them sort of like, all right, I want to go home. They started chirping up a little bit. But for like that whole time, all they did was puzzles. And I asked the parents, I was like, man, you don't see it anymore. Like it's so often you just see, you know, straight you go for dinner, iPad's out, sort of shuts them up. And she was like, look, it was hard at the start, but if you persist with it, honestly, it's like, it's not that difficult if you keep persisting with it initially. It's so easy to give in. It's so easy to be like, oh, just have this. But now they love, like he loves puzzles. And if they do watch anything, the little boy loves Steve Irwin. So it's all the YouTube is just Steve Irwin, Australia Zoo. That's all he watches.
That's the best.
And I was like, well, that's great then.
It is because, you know, like that's so old school. And I think that's exactly what, you know, I know I did. We probably grew up with, you know, you had your colouring in books or your toys and you'd pull them out at the table and whoever was kind of next to you would join in as part of their conversation. Yeah. And it's so important because you get to that point and then it just snowballs from there because those kids who, you know, have had their phone at the table while you're out at dinner are then the adolescents with their phone out and then the parents are like, why aren't you engaging? And it's like, that's all they know. Yeah. And it just continues. And, you know, I think the rate at which YouTube and, you know, all those kind of social medias is developing is quite crazy. And people I'm not a tech savvy person, so it blows my mind. But, you know, we're sitting here having this conversation. We take breaths between our words. Yeah. It's slow. But if you watch something that someone has edited out, the breaths that they're taking in between and it's moving at a much faster pace, no kid wants to listen to you when you're talking and taking breaths. And
so slow.
Yeah.
Disengaged. Yeah.
You know, it happens. It like... You could be the most interesting person in the room, but you're not moving as fast as the YouTube video is, so you've lost them.
It's interesting because I feel like the attention span of kids is just getting smaller and smaller. So that means whatever they're watching, the entertainment's got to be more and more engaging and it becomes more and more addictive.
Yep.
And we talked about sort of the pressure of, you know, what you see online and I guess how do you deal with kids that have that pressure to perform academically? I've always asked my guests, what are your 3 non-negotiables for living a healthy and full life? For me, it's movement, community, and good nutrition. I've learned that what you fill your body with plays a massive role in how you feel physically and mentally. That's why I use True Protein. They're an Aussie brand doing things the right way. Clean, natural supplements with no artificial additives or fillers. Everything's made in-house in Sydney's northern beaches using the highest quality ingredients sourced from around the world. Whether it's supporting energy, improving focus, or reducing fatigue, their products genuinely help me show up better every single day. And just like Mind Your Head, they live by values I stand by. Be true, be you, and take care of your whole self. Is that a common thing you see with kids?
Yeah, absolutely. When you're, like, I think you put that really well, like when your confidence and self-esteem or, if that is as a direct relation to how successful you are, whether that's in your career, how much money you earn, it might be in a sporting environment, how successful and far you go in that space, or as it comes to, getting A's. And if you don't achieve that, it then goes, well, I'm not worthy.
Yeah. And
you do see it, and kids put themselves on, gives themselves such high standards to achieve. I do think a lot of it is based off social media. They see lots of other successful people out there. They've got more access to success in a small environment, and influencers and, people on social media are able to do so much and reach so many people. But I think that then in turn gives a lot of young kids more pressure, and that's not on anybody posting content or doing their job.
That's just the game.
That's the game. Absolutely. Like, so many kids, when I'm doing my rapport building sessions and I'm like, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? And instead of, you don't hear, I want to be a fireman or a policeman or a teacher. It's, I want to be an influencer or I want to be a YouTuber. And I'm like, wild.
Yeah,
like,
that's all they see.
That's all they see. Yeah. It's what they experience. Even like children being influencers, like, I don't know their names, but they unbox things on YouTube and
get all the free stuff and stuff like that. Yeah.
And kids like, I want to do that. And like, I don't blame you. Like, that looks great.
Yeah.
It's just
it's a fickle world though, isn't it?
World.
Yeah. Because I've got a family friend that she's 16 and she's left school to be a Instagram model. I'm like, what the fuck? Who's 16? Like, what's
crazy?
What's going on? And she does like photo shoots and like bikini stuff, and I'm like, she's 16.
Yeah.
Like, isn't this illegal? Like, what's
feels
going
illegal.
on here? Like, what is going on in this world? And it's almost like given that false sense of reality, because that's not real life. Like what you see on social media, and kids, they can't distinguish what's real and what's not real, and they just see social media thinking that's the real world, and it's far from it.
Yep.
That's just the highlight reel that they want you to see to suck you in. And I think like they get out of high school or get out into the real world and they realize like, shit, there's actually not like this at all.
Yep.
It almost underprepares kids for the future.
Absolutely.
And like, you might come out with a degree or a grade, and then you know what you got into uni. But a lot of kids come out of school, high school, and they have no idea what they want to do.
Yeah, it's really quite confronting when you're in that space, and you're so vulnerable in that space, and you feel like you want to have everything together, but you don't, and you shouldn't be expected to either. And I think times have changed as well, where you might have gone into a career and stayed in that for your whole life. I think they say you do up to like 5 different types of jobs now, and I'm like, it's crazy.
It's crazy. Well, I'm definitely past that, and I still don't really know.
No.
Well, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
You said before how you said you're building that rapport with the kids. What do you say to them to make them feel that you understand them? Because a lot of the time I think it would be like kids, coming to you, not feeling understood.
Yep.
They probably don't understand why they're feeling like this too.
Yeah.
Is there some things that you can give us that you sort of say to them that helps them be understood?
I feel like the rapport building space is letting them know that it's their space. Yes, their mum or dad or caregiver has brought them there. And usually there is this like stigma, this sense of like, I'm a naughty kid, that's why I'm here. I'm doing something wrong, that's why I'm here. So they don't really want to kind of borrow me.
Because you're the baddie as well.
Because I'm here, I'm on mum and dad's side.
Yeah.
So letting them know that, this space is for them. If they don't want mum and dad in there, we kick them out. If, they want to tell me something, it's not my job to tell mum and dad word for word what it is that's going on for them. My job is to make sure that they have a safe space to be able to communicate and learn to communicate what their experience is, and to then give the information that's needed to whoever it is that's taking them home that day to keep them safe at home.
Yeah, okay. Neurodivergence.
Yeah.
That's a word I didn't know before meeting you.
Yep.
Do you want to explain a little bit about it? What does it involve?
God.
Is it a long one?
I feel like I don't even know how to start.
Oh, really?
ADHD?
Yeah.
It's neurodivergence really encapsulates, I guess, your typical autism and ADHD. Definitely other things kind of come under the umbrella, and it's not just those two. Absolutely. There's a lot of, I guess mental health can dabble in there as well, because it's rare for someone with autism or ADHD just to present with autism or ADHD on their own. They usually have related symptoms like anxiety or depression.
Oh, right.
But yeah, normally you're kind of autism spectrum disorder or attention deficit.
Yeah. Do you feel like it's becoming so common now with kids? I hear a lot of things where, a kid's got lots of energy and they go, yeah, you got ADHD.
Yeah.
Is it like that? Or is it being misdiagnosed? Is it, I see it all the time when, kids have got heaps of energy and they just go, yep, you've got ADHD, you're over there.
And I think, I do think a lot of it is being misdiagnosed. A lot of it needs to be stripped back to look at the impact and I guess the reasons for that behaviour. And when we strip it back and look at the environment and we see screen times through the roof, or, they're not getting their needs met at home, or they've been through a massive transition like moving from, kindy preschool to prep, or kindy to prep now. These are huge transitions. All of a sudden you're at a play-based centre where you can move around and do what you want. Now you're told to sit at a desk. Anyone's going to be bouncing off the walls, Yeah,
I never really thought about it like that, yeah.
Yeah, I just think there's a lot that goes into it, and it really has to look at what's the impact and how long has it, I guess coming back to how long has it been going on for? Has this young person had time to settle in after this transition? No? All right, well, let's give it a bit of time. But like we look at the first 3 years as being really key in terms of development, but then we look at, I guess, when you're 4, 5, and 6, you're then not only continuing to develop, but you're then changing a lot of your social skills. You're learning a lot of new social skills. You put in a lot of new environments. There's just a lot happening for young people so early on.
Yeah. Because I had a guy on the podcast, and he talked about that he had depression when he was a kid, but a lot of the time an adult would say to him, oh, you're too young to get depression.
Yeah.
You haven't experienced life yet.
Yeah.
You haven't gone through any hardship yet. But at the same time, it's like whatever they're going through, whatever their 10 is, that's their 10.
Yeah.
All pain is relatable to what you've gone through.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of like that narrative around, adults saying to kids like, not validating their feelings or emotions or whatever they're going through and just sort of brushing off going, you don't know how hard it actually can get.
Yeah.
Well, that time in their life right now, that's the hardest thing they've ever gone through.
Absolutely. And, kids are very, very robust, and they can take a lot on, but, they're also children and they're learning, and, there's just a lot of moving pieces for kids these days. A lot to take on.
Yeah. So how does school, I think, socially or academically impact neurodivergent children? Long one.
I find a lot of the young people I work with don't describe school as being a space they enjoy.
Why is that?
I don't think that they feel understood in the current kind of curriculum. And depending on the teacher they have, I think there's, as with any job, there's a real mix of different generations and teachers who have been teaching for years and years and years, and then obviously you've got your brand new graduates. And I think there are very different styles of teaching. I find that children who are neurodivergent respond really well to anyone who can validate their experience, that can be flexible with their kind of delivery of content, and can use a strengths-based approach. With children who are neurodiverse or neurodivergent, they have sensory overload. And, you know, I remember walking into my school classrooms and there are pictures hanging wall to wall and there are streamers and there are colours and it's a beautiful space. But to someone who is neurodivergent and has that sensory overload, they're like, this is my worst nightmare.
This is hell. Yeah.
I'm distracted by every single thing in this room other than the thing I'm supposed to be focused on. You know, we want to be able to make accommodations for kids who are neurodivergent and whose brains just work a little bit differently. We don't want to then put them in a position where they then feel everyone has to make changes to suit them, because I don't think that does them much.
They must feel isolated or almost enhance the feeling of them feeling different, wouldn't it? If everyone's sort of catering for them.
Because then they move on to the next grade and the teacher responds completely differently and then they're like, I don't know how to navigate this. So it's about upskilling the children or the young people with skills to be able to manage that and to be able to advocate for themselves. This is what I need to support, you know, my sensory experience.
It must be so tough to get kids to be able to do that.
Hard.
Especially with, like you say, you know, a lot of the kids that I know that have autism, the social side of it, they just, I couldn't see them, you know, voicing their opinion like that in a comfortable space. They would just rather,
oh my gosh,
hide it all in.
Me, even as an adult, I'm like, I don't want to tell anybody.
Yeah.
It's so hard. And I think, you know, playtimes, whilst people go, oh, get outside, run around, burn your energy, be with your friends, that in itself can be really overwhelming as well. And
I bet.
So many schools do such a great job where they've got, you know, enrichment centres, hubs, different spaces that they can go to just chill out.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's so good. I think school is really hard for a lot of people, and I think there's probably a lot of different changes that people would argue need to be made within the Department of Education. But I think one thing that they do is allow that space for kids to have a breather. Like, I don't ever remember there being a space set up where you could retreat to other than the library, but you had to like sit there and read a book.
I remember having like sleep time at preschool, but like that's about it. Like nap time, you'd have nap time, but like nothing at high school, like nothing at all. And you kind of felt like they just had to fend for themselves. Like, and at the same time, as kids, we don't understand that either. Like, we don't have the education around. No. We hear autism and then we just think, oh, that they're different.
Yeah.
But like, they might, they might process information differently. They might, they might say things or differently, but they're not different. Like, we're all the same.
No,
I think that education with teachers, but I think that education with kids too.
Yeah.
How to support that child or in the best way they possibly can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think at the end of the day, we're all social beings and everyone needs connection, even young people. And obviously the autism spectrum is so vast, no one looks the same.
I think I'm on the spectrum.
I've had a few people. I reflect on my cousin at one point said to me, do you think I have something? And I was like, look, we could probably just say you're neurospicy.
Neurospicy?
Yeah, because, I don't think if I whipped out a DSM, you'd fit all the diagnostic criteria.
Yeah.
But you clearly think differently. But like the impact, you're a very successful person. So, you found ways to manage or to cope in your world and your environments.
It's interesting because like one of the things Gabor Mate said when he was up on stage is that he said, don't lie to your kids. He said the best thing, because a lot of the time when you're a parent, you try to hide or protect things, protect your kid, hide things from them, make sure they've got the safest environment, most comfortable environment ever. But he was saying kids know, like kids can pick up your energy. They can pick up when you're not telling the truth. They can sort of sense that something's not right. And he said the best thing you could possibly do is don't lie to your kids, but tell them the truth, but give them tools and ways to cope with reality.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we find our own ways to cope with reality. Like I know that I went down that drugs and alcohol to cope with my reality. And like more often than not, we choose, like we find the wrong things to cope.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be, drugs and alcohol. It could be gambling or sex or, social media. It can be all sorts of different addictions that you need to give yourself that sense of release or calmness, a sense of like, escape, where you've got to like escape the thoughts in your head. But now it's like, the thoughts in my head were like the enemy.
Yeah.
But now it's like I can peacefully sit down for however long. Look, I work out in the mines for 12 hours every day. And more often than not, I don't have any music on. I just sit there.
Yeah.
And that used to be, looking back in years gone by, that used to be like hell for me.
Yeah.
And now it's like I can happily sit there for 12 hours and I can just like be with my own thoughts and be at peace.
Yeah. I like running. That's like one of my big coping mechanisms, but I don't ever listen to music or podcasts, and people honestly are like, Ray, you're a psycho. Like, and I was like, sometimes it's head noise and I just need to kind of sit with that. And sometimes I'm like literally having a chat to myself, or sometimes it's nothing and it's like my peace. But I completely get that. It's, it's all varied. And it's.
Do you deal with a lot of kids that are overthinkers?
Yeah. Yep.
How do you navigate that period? Because I can remember when I was a kid that, if I went and saw a psychologist when I was a kid, I would have had 1,000 questions because I couldn't silence the noise. I couldn't rearrange what was going in my head to make it all fit. And it was just all muck up there. When a kid sits down and they're sort of, say they're me, I'm doing a therapy session right now. How do you sort of talk them through that period of like navigating their emotions, their feelings, their like all the dialogue that's going inside their head, and sort of get them to a calm, safe space? Yeah,
it's doing everything that kind of we've been speaking about so far, in the sense that we want to provide the co-regulation. So and depending on the child, whether that's, being physically close to them and providing them with that, whether it's giving them space and just being a calming presence, we want to be able to identify and label the emotions for them where we can.
So if they say it, you just go, this is what this means, or this is the.
It can kind of be like, I'm really curious. Is this the feeling that you were experiencing in that moment? And being able to provide a word for it, because so many kids come in and go, I'm like, how was your day, or whatever it might be. Oh, good, bad. I'm like, they're not emotions. And they look at me and like, what do you mean? I was like, were you happy, sad, excited? Were you embarrassed today? Like, or like there are so many different emotions, and that's really overwhelming. So being able to label it and kind of, provide that space to really reflect and give the young person, this is what I'm kind of picking up on. Is that right? Tell me if that's wrong. Or it sounds like this is what might have been happening for you, without kind of saying you were feeling this at this point. It's being curious and giving them a space to be able to unpack some of those things.
Almost letting them figure it out for themselves with a little bit of guidance.
Yeah, like reflective listening. I was like, I'm literally just saying what you said in a slightly different way. And they're like, oh my God, yeah, that's it. I was like, well, you just told me it all. Like, you did that yourself.
But that's like the gift that what you do and all the psychology that I see. It's almost like they repeat it back to you. And let you think about it for yourself. And then you almost come up with the answer yourself. And then all you sort of do is just mirror or sort of just repeat back to them.
It's just really about kind of guiding them through it. We don't want to put them on a path and say, this is your path. Like, they still have to find it themselves. The strategies and the things that we talk about in session need to be generalized, that they can apply outside of them. So we don't want to be so rigid in the sessions and do it all for them, because that's not going to provide any benefit. So it's very much like reframing it and guiding them on that journey.
Do you get kids to journal at all? Because I think journaling is something that really helps me write down feelings, emotions, write down exactly how I'm feeling at that point in time. And even like, I used to be very reactive to certain situations that have triggered me, where I always used to just react straight away with emotion. And then later on I'll go, why the hell did I say that? I should have just shut up. Like, there was no point saying that. But I needed to release whatever it was. So I needed to like let it out, but I was always letting it out in the wrong sort of way, in a very negative way. I started to write things down just to get it off my chest. Write down how I felt and what I wanted to say. And like, I would always have this thing where, you know, if I still wanted to say it a week from then I would say it. And like, honestly, like 9 times out of 10,
most of the time,
I would read it back and go, thank God I didn't say that. You know, but it felt great that I had to like, you know, almost let it go, like release it off my chest and just, you know, send it away.
So many kids come in and go, I can't get to sleep at night as I just have all of these thoughts in my head about the day, what's coming up tomorrow. So using ideas such as like a worry box, where you literally just write them out and put them in a box, get them out of your head, get them somewhere else, revisit them in the morning. Is it still something you're worried about? Let's talk about it. You know, bring that to mum, bring that to dad, whoever it is. I think journaling is something a lot of people struggle to lean into.
What do you think that is?
I don't exactly know. I think we're definitely getting to a time where screens are preferred and no one wants to do their handwriting. No one's really enforced to do it. You get to a certain point, you've got iPads and laptops. You don't need to do.
It's almost like voice memos, almost like you can just
So I think there's like that real preference for it not to be handwriting. But there is a lot of research that goes out and has been proven that if you're able to write things out, it's a lot more effective than it is to type it or to speak it in that sense. So, yeah, I don't know, but I think it can be so helpful, and it's a real lean in kind of process because it can be as structured or as, you know, up to you as you want it to be. You know, you can write down it in a Dear Diary kind of fashion and just like word vomit whatever you need to get out. You can go, all right, I'm just going to write four dot points. And for kids, I kind of like to do 3 stars and a wish. What are 3 good things that happened in your day? Because it's so important. We often forget and don't focus on the good things, and it might be that you got up and had a shower. But what are your 3 good days? What are your 3 good things? And what is one thing you wish that you could change, or, you know, that went differently for you or didn't go as you expected?
I love that.
Yeah, so I like that one. It's a good one. Another one that I've seen a fair bit and encourage maybe the little bit older ones to use is more like lemons and oranges. So what are your lemons for the day? What are the sour things, the things that didn't go so well? But what are the oranges? What are the sweet and good things that happened in your day as well? And the importance of acknowledging the bad things happened, or, you know, the inconveniences happened, but there were good things too. Yeah.
That's super important because a lot of the time, like, you know, that negative bias where, you know, when I think the negative stuff hangs around or feels more intense than the positive, you know.
Our brains so much quicker go to the bad things.
Straight away.
You're just hardwired. And it doesn't matter whether you...
Is it a defense mechanism? Is it a you know, a caveman type thing? It is?
That's what I'm kind of thinking, because it's just like hardwired no matter who you are and what your experiences are.
It's like almost like we've got to protect ourselves. If that was bad, we've got to learn from that and not do that again. So it's just hardwired for bad is like security and safety and constantly learning to be safe from all the bad.
Yeah, and like I know we've talked about it before, like, you know, you mentioned drugs and alcohol and, you know, different coping mechanisms that people have that would be considered as bad or maladaptive, but they're safety behaviors, you know. They keep you safe. They protect you, whether it's, you know, at school something is happening, it's easier for you to avoid it so you don't go. But then the next time it's just as hard. So it's harder to change, you know. Whatever it is that you're experiencing, when I drink, I don't feel that way anymore. That's bad and labelled by society as bad, but from a trauma-informed kind of lens, that's keeping you safe.
That's the remedy.
Yeah. And it's about recognizing that, all right, this harmful coping mechanism was actually keeping me safe. It's now. I can recognize the challenges that it's presenting. I want to make a healthier change. How can I make some differences?
And that's like the hardest thing, is trying to break that cycle that's been keeping you safe for so long. That's almost been your solace or your place of, place of safety and security. For years, that was like the thing that you align yourself with. And to break that and to recognize, like, it might be my safe space, but it's not doing me any good.
Yep.
Like almost starting again and be like, all right, what do I got to do now to find something that's going to be more healthy for me?
Yeah.
That must be like, I know for me, like that was very hard to break that, because it felt like starting again. It's just like, here we go again. Like I found something, it may not be good for me, but at that point in time, it was good for me.
Yeah. And it's with any behavior change, whether you're an adult or a parent trying to implement it with a young person, you usually see the spike. We're trying to implement a strategy. Behavior is getting worse. And, it's not working. Persist. Stick with it, because it's change. We're getting used to it. It's hard. We're pushing ourselves. It goes up, and then it will plateau, or it'll come down. Yeah. And it's just time, and there is no set. If you do it every day for 3 weeks, it'll be better.
Yeah.
There's no set time. Everyone is so varied.
Yeah, absolutely. What's one thing you wish every kid who struggles with their mental health could hear?
That their emotions are okay.
Yeah.
Like it's as simple as that. You're allowed to be sad. It's okay to be angry. What's not okay is the choices we make, right? But you're not getting in trouble, or the responses you're getting are not because of the emotion. It's because of the choice.
It must be hard to get that through kids, isn't it? Like
so hard.
Especially, I know, like especially with boys, when it's they're fighting and it's anger, and it's just like anger's always a bad thing.
Yeah.
Always painted as a bad thing, but it's such a natural, healthy emotion to feel.
Absolutely. And I think it's a narrative that's so common. If I feel angry, it's bad.
Yeah.
It's not.
I thought that for years. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's feeling angry, so normal. Everyone feels angry. The level everybody feels anger at is different, sure. But the emotion itself is so important. We need to have it. We need to be able to experience it. We need to be able to regulate so that we can make better choices, so that we're not hurting ourselves or others. But the emotion,
it's okay.
So okay.
Yeah. I love that, because I think for years I always associated anger, jealousy, resentment, all that sort of stuff as just negative, bad emotions. So whenever it came up, I would suppress it.
Yeah.
Whenever it came up, I would suppress it. And it was just constantly suppressing these emotions that I'd labeled as negative, or society labeled as negative, or what we got told at school or parents or whatever it is. And then before you know it, you've got these kids or these young men, these young boys that have just been suppressed their whole childhood of this emotion, and all of a sudden they have an outburst or whatever it is. And it's like you said, going back to that, regulating your emotions and knowing what to do and labeling them and going, all right, this is, like you said, like your emotions are valid.
Yeah.
It's all natural.
Yeah. And, that's actually where you see the danger, I guess, is when you push it down, you push it down, you push it down. So instead of getting angry the first time and, it was a 2 out of 10, you're now out of 10 exploding. And to be able to regulate at that level, so much harder than it is to be able to regulate when you're frustrated. It's...
How do you regulate when you're in the moment and you're at an 8 out of 10? Because that's something that I've had to learn. And I'm very happy and proud of myself that I'm at a point where, like I said before, I used to like react, and then later on I'd be like, why did I do it? Like, why did I say that? Why did I do that? And now I'm at a point where something triggers me, and something will always trigger me. I always felt like I was always trying to remove the trigger, right? And I felt like I was just a losing battle, because there's always something new that like comes up that I'm like, oh, that got me angry.
Yeah.
But then I think like, that's fine that it got me angry, but it's what's not fine is how I'm reacting to it. So I'm happy at a point in my life where if something's triggered me, instead of reacting, I almost sit with it for a little bit and be like, all right, why is it like that? I have two choices: either get mad for the day, and that's what it was like.
Yeah.
I'll get mad for the day, or I take it for what it is. Whether it's try figure out maybe on the drive home or later at night, like why did that trigger me? And that sort of saved my time where I would always like get angry. 2 or 3 days later, I'm like over it. I'm like, why did I just waste 2 or 3 days like dwelling over it? Like, why did that get me? I'm so angry about it. And now it's at a point where like having that emotional awareness in the moment and just to be able to like assess it more often than not, let it go.
Yeah. I think this is where the benefit of like therapy or a safe space comes in, because you need to be able to do the groundwork, right? You need to be able to recognize what are your triggers, what are your body sensations, what are, how do you react in those moments? What does that look like for you? So that when you're presented with those triggers, like you said, we can't remove the triggers, but what we can do is prepare for them. And that's where when we look at strategies, we either have proactive strategies, things that we do to make sure that we're as regulated as we can be when the trigger arrives, or we have reactive strategies that we need to use when we're in the moment. When you are at a red and you are 10 out of 10, doesn't matter who you are or, what anybody says to you, you're not going to be able to listen to anybody to help calm you down. It's honestly just a time.
Yeah, you're seeing red.
You're seeing red, I can't tell you to take a deep breath because you're not going to be able to. It's purely about space and time and regulating.
So what you're trying to do is avoid getting to that 9 out of 10, that 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
Do everything you possibly can.
Yeah. It's about being as proactive in the strategies that you can do to stop you from getting so big so that you can catch yourself essentially before you get to that 10 out of 10. I think specifically in the kind of child space, great movies are out now like Inside Out, where they talk about different emotions and that really helps kids label them. There are also the zones of regulation, which are used quite commonly in schools. I don't particularly like the zones of regulation because it's like, all right, if you're red, you're angry. If you are in the blue zone, you are sad. If you are green, you're ready to learn. And if you're yellow, you're like silly. But each emotion doesn't just have like the one standpoint. Essentially, you have a scale. And you can be at a 0 and calm, and you can like gradually increase, and every emotion essentially has that. So if we looked at it from like a positive emotions perspective, you can be happy and that can get too excited, and then it gets to silly, and then all of a sudden you're actually out of control and it's a positive emotion that you're feeling, but you can't listen to anyone, you can't control yourself. You're on a high. Exactly. It's the same thing when it's anger. You can be annoyed and frustrated, and that's where we want to kind of catch ourselves and go, all right, if this keeps going, I'm going to explode, because sure enough, you're going to get to anger and furious, and then there's no hope, right? So it's doing the groundwork to recognize what your escalation looks like so that you can hopefully catch yourself and be proactive before you get to red.
How are you teaching the kids to catch themselves?
Oh, there's so many activities that we do. Yeah, lots of activities. It's so hard.
Yeah.
Especially as a kid when you don't have, like, your brain's not developed.
To have that emotional maturity.
Yeah.
In the moment to be like,
it's so hard.
Ray said this.
Yeah. No one ever says that. I wish they could. No. Yeah. But it's about them understanding that, they don't go from 0 to 100. That, their baseline is sitting pretty high, so they're going from angry to furious. So how can we bring that down? That's when like masking comes into it. No one ever looks, like they're sitting quite high. They're like, oh, that kid's like pretty under control. Like, no, they're not. They are floating on an edge that's about to tip over.
Is there signs? I know when kids are masking it, but is there tell signs that you can see that kids are about to...
Varies for everyone.
Yeah.
But usually, like, you just look at the tension in a young person. They might not be making eye contact with you. They might be moving themselves further away. They might be moving towards some of the chaos, and you're like, that's just not going to be helpful.
Yeah. Is masking very common, is it?
Huge.
Is it?
Huge. I think kids are so clever. They're They put all their energy in. They know what's socially expected of them. They know that they need to behave a certain way to fit in with their friends or teachers or whoever it is. And they then reach a point where they can't mask anymore. Usually it's when they get home to their safe space and they explode. And parents are like, what is happening? We're getting
good
this.
before.
Yeah, we're getting this extremely dysregulated child coming home from school, but school's saying that there's no problems. It's because they are working overtime to keep a lid on things. And then by the time they get home where they know that they can, let their walls down and that mum's going to be there to help them, that they explode.
Man, we see that in adults as well, like that masking, like, I just think about it now. It's just when it goes unaddressed, it's interesting how, if you don't deal with it or acknowledge it or work through it, how that becomes you're an adult and you do the exact same thing at work where, how you going? Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Living the dream.
Yeah.
I see it at my work all the time where people say hello to each other. How was your week off? Yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
Just to make conversation. But reality, when they go back to their rooms or camp or something, they're just in the her locker, like they're struggling.
Yeah, classic one for, I guess, women. I'm fine. Everyone knows you're not fine.
So look in that camera and tell all the men listening.
Exactly.
What does fine mean?
Not fine.
Not fine.
Ask questions, help. It's just, it is. It's, no one wants to be the burden. No one wants to, flip their lid. No one wants to make someone else take all of whatever it is.
Is that the bottom of it, do you think, while we mask, because we don't want to be a burden?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like, everyone wants to, we're social beings. We want to have positive social interactions. If we talk about what's going wrong, we feel like we ruin the mood. We don't want anybody else's day to feel like ours. So I'm fine.
It's funny because when we think about that, about ourselves, we automatically think people don't want to hear us or we're a burden. But if we hear a friend struggling, we're the first ones to be like, why didn't you tell me?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm always there for you.
Yeah.
But if it's you think, people are going to think I'm weird. People are going to get annoyed. People are going to think I'm a burden. But it's when it's the opposite, you don't think like that,
Not at
isn't
all.
it?
Yeah.
We're almost so hypercritical of ourselves in situations like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, we're up to.
Oh, sorry, I jump all over the place.
That's fine.
Got to neatly tie it in a bow at the end.
You've answered a few questions just then. For any adult listening, what's one mindset shift that could change the way they support the young people in their life?
I think it comes back to what we were saying before, there's no such thing as perfect parenting. And that you have to be able to look after yourself to look after anybody else. If you're running on empty and then your young person has a meltdown, maybe they fall over and they need you, and you're like, I've got nothing left to give. You're the person that always has to be giving. So well-being is well-doing. You have to be able to look after yourself, whether that's time alone, whether that's, if you've got a specific routine and you got to go to the gym to feel at your best that day, if you've got to journal in the morning or listen to a podcast or a certain type of music, you've got to do what you need to do to get in the best mindset so that you can look after yourself but look after others.
When you chat to parents, do you do any work with them in terms of their inner child?
Not so much.
Not so much.
If a parent came to me, I probably could.
Yeah.
But in the sense that the client for me is the child.
Yeah.
So I would always encourage, and this is where I quite often tell parents that, this is not a space. We're working on you and your parenting as such. So I can identify that maybe you need some more support in this certain area, and I would refer them to someone else.
Yeah. Because I think one of the questions that I'd love to sort of ask you also refers back to sort of my childhood and things that I've experienced. But so many of us sort of are in our 20s or 30s, we're adults, we realise, so many things shaped us when we were children. Why does it take us until we're adults to recognise those patterns or those experiences for us to want to change them?
Yeah, Yeah, it's a good question. And, you know, depending on what the experiences are, it can really depend on, is it, you know, our brain has now fully come to terms with what it is that we experienced. I think, like I said before, children are robust. You know, you don't have to have necessarily an extreme trauma experience to have moments where you're like, you know, you now get to an adult and you are like, oh, why did that happen? Why do I respond like this? So, yeah, it's tricky.
It is tricky.
It is tricky. I do think a lot of it is it takes anyone a long time to process it. So maybe it is partly that our brain kind of fully develops. Maybe it's, you know, we're so stuck in a space where we just need to push it down that we reach a point where it's like, okay, I'm ready for this now. Everyone's journey is so different though. It's tricky.
How's your knee?
Yeah, so sorry, I'm just constantly fidgeting with it. No,
Did you get arrested on something?
No, it's
Are you
okay.
sure?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was hurting. I had Lockie Welch came on the podcast. His one episode got released last week, and he shared how he lost his best friend to suicide when he was about 15 years old, and he didn't process the grief, and he sort of turned to drugs and to feel, you know, like we were talking about before, feel that release and to feel a lot better than what he was feeling. How important it is, like we talked about before, having that safe space for emotional healing. How do you sort of create it when it's sort of at the family home that a kid can sort of process that grief and not carry it? Does it go back to what you said?
Kind of.
Yeah. Because I think, you know, obviously children, they process grief so differently to adults.
Grief. Oh,
Is it?
it's a tricky. Okay, everything's tricky.
Yeah.
No.
Have you dealt with a lot of kids going through grief?
No.
No. Okay.
I haven't.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, I know there's lots out there on your stages of grief and moving through them, but you usually don't. It's not always necessarily in a chronological order. But I think it's really understanding the fact that, you know, your grief actually doesn't go away. And I think there's the analogy of like it's like a stone in your pocket, and you get stronger. So the stone feels lighter as opposed to it disappearing. And kids, I think, depending on what type of grief it is or where it happens, you know, returning to the family home where maybe that's a cause of a lot of the grief. That's one of these environmental factors that we can't necessarily change unless that parent or caregiver or, you know, whatever environment it is, like it could be residential care.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of uncontrollables in that. So it's how can we support the young person getting to a point where, you know, they feel stronger and they've got those skills or the space to be able to navigate it. And again, it's okay to feel what they are. And it's something that you hope no young person has to go through. But, you know, statistics show that it's more common.
Thank you so much for coming on today. I do have some final questions for you that I ask all my guests.
Oh.
So just bear with me for 1 second. So where are we? Here we are. So you can answer these as quickly or as long as you want.
Okay.
What are your 3 non-negotiables for living a healthy and full life?
3.
Running's one. Obviously, you love running.
Yeah, I think for me, it's running. For other people, I would say it's having an extracurricular.
Yeah.
Right? It's something away from school and home, another place for you to seek connection. For me, that's running in my sport. Routine.
Oh, you're a big routine girl.
Routine.
Oh, yeah.
Not necessarily like at this time I do this, like super rigid, but I think it provides predictability for your day. I think there can be so much, particularly for me in my day, that's unpredictable. I don't know what people are coming in with. I can be as prepared as I want to, and they come in and go, we're not talking about any of that today, Ray. Buckle up, it's a big one. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I need to be as prepared as I can. And for me, that's routine. What's one more? I don't know.
You don't know? We've got, what about sleep?
Oh, sleep's huge. I love my sleep.
You love your sleep?
I love my sleep. Although sleeping with an injury is proving
Tough.
Can't
move.
Can't move
Can't
as
roll over.
much. Yeah.
Are you a back sleeper now then?
Yeah, hate it. Terrible. It's actually awful.
What have you always been, a side sleeper?
Slider like on my belly,
Yeah.
you know? Just, yeah.
We'll get used to that.
Yeah. Sleep's huge. Also like eating. Oh God, now I'm not going to be able to stop.
Yeah, that's
like
right.
making sure you've eaten enough.
Are these sort of some of the things that you tell kids as well? It's not just, what's happening at school. It's like, what are you eating? Like, how's your sleep? Yeah, a lot of kids like have that chaos environment back home.
I have one client, and if they ever heard this, they would be like, stop telling me to eat food. And it is like, it comes back to like your Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Have you had enough water, sleep, food, and do you have shelter? Like, which you think, everyone does. But so many kids are too busy or distracted that they don't eat enough food. So then they topple over so much quicker because they don't have anything to sustain them. So, yeah.
It is a privilege, like looking back on it. It is such a privilege that I grew up in a household where we never had fast food. Never. Like mum and dad always cooked home meals for us. And I didn't know how much of a privilege that was until I sort of left home and experience other people and their backgrounds and other families and that sort of thing. Even people I work with out in the mines that, I work with 25-year-olds. I know a 40-year-old. I work with a 55-year-old that doesn't eat greens, that doesn't eat any veggies, that doesn't eat anything. Like it's always steak, gravy and chips.
Yeah, right.
And I'm just like, he's like, oh, no, hate that. Don't want to try that. And I'm like, it's good for you. And he's just like, nah, steak, gravy and chips. I go, how long have you been having that for? And he's just like, all my life since I was like 10 years old. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
I feel like I can tell the difference on a day where I've like had kind of my couple of pieces of fruit that I'd have as my snacks or throughout the day and the days that I don't. And I'm like, just like the difference in craving sugars and things. It all plays in. And then
it all plays a massive role, doesn't it?
Huge role. And like even neurodivergent kids with medication, that suppresses their appetite. And they're like, Ray,
does it?
Yeah, like Ritalin is a really big one you're not as hungry on.
Yeah.
Like, Ray, I'm just not hungry. I'm like, but you still need to eat food.
Yeah.
And trying to find ways, like when your body is saying, I'm not hungry and still needs to be fueled because you're going to hit a point where you're just going to crash.
Is there natural remedies instead of taking medication?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I feel like that's really not a space I've looked
too far into.
And obviously medications aren't even my space.
Yeah.
That's more for like psychiatrists and pediatricians. But I hear a lot of clients try different natural remedies and they report good things. So I feel like there's always options.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Who's your hero?
Oh, I feel like my gut says like my parents.
Yeah.
But right now, it's my granddad.
Why your granddad?
Oh, because he's just an angel. I'll probably cry.
Is he the man?
He's just the man.
Yeah.
He would do anything for you.
Yeah.
He has given so much to my mum and my uncle. And, he's had many things he's wanted to achieve in life. But if his kids needed anything,
always there.
Always there. My grandma has dementia and she recently moved, it's probably been a little while now, into like an aged care facility. So he's like on his own, but he is like thriving. He visits her every day and then he goes and he plays bowls and he's like so happy and
it's like a scene out of the Notebook.
So much love to give.
Yeah.
And I think that just trickles down, that constant giving and caring. So I'd say My granddad. And it's so nice to see him like with my nephew
Yeah.
and the light that brings to him, and then my grandma, and
Yeah.
it's just beautiful. So I'd say my granddad.
Well, he's setting like an example, like it filters down of like how to show that love, because you guys see it.
Yeah.
And then you see a positive, influence in your life.
Absolutely.
It's amazing. How have you defined success? Mm.
Success, when I think about it, I immediately go career, right? And I think pretty much everyone will. But I think on the days where I feel like I've had a successful day, and if we're stripping it right back to just a day-by-day thing, it's the days where I'm happy. It's the days where I've done something that's made me happy, whether that's go for a run, get a coffee, start my day right, seeing the sunrise, or I've come home and been able to have a chat with my partner, or gone to hang out with some friends. So I feel like for me, success is happiness.
Yeah, internally.
Yeah. Just
I
being,
love that.
Content with who I am. I think that comes back to, the conversation we had on adolescence and identity, right? There's been many times where I've not been happy or questioned who I am or what gave me worth and value, but knowing where I am now and being happy with that, and eternally, I'm like pretty set on that. That's success.
How do you think being a psychologist has changed you as a person, and also changed how you want to be a mother, if at all?
I think I feel like I'm in a pretty privileged position for hopefully when I can become a mother, because I have a lot of these tools that so many people don't know about. That does not mean, and I think this is where I'll struggle becoming mothers. I'll be like, perfect parent.
Oh, I have all the answers.
I have all the answers, but I don't.
Yeah.
So I think it's given me a lot more awareness in terms of being prepared for those sorts of things. But, one thing I think it's done is given me empathy for all people. And, that learning not to judge, anyone based off what they're doing. And I think, again, coming back to maladaptive behaviours, that's people go, oh, they're an alcoholic. That's keeping them safe.
Yeah.
Sure, they're hurting a lot of people around them.
Yeah.
And they can't quite recognize it. It's keeping them safe. That person's about to explode and hurt someone. That anger is keeping them safe.
And it's interesting. That's definitely something that I've learned over the last few years of sort of doing the work that I've been doing, is that I always used to see an alcoholic or see someone struggling with drugs or see a gambler and thinking, just judging them straight away for that act, and not actually thinking what's happened in their life for them to resort to doing that, and then for it to become addictive. And you always think of the act like I don't get around gambling, and I couldn't imagine being addicted to gambling. But for them, that's their safe haven.
Yeah.
And there's a guy at work who is really, really obese, and he'll come to work and he'll have a big Domino's large pizza and two 1.2 liters bottles of Coke. And when I first started working with him, I was just like, how can you be doing that to your body? Just honestly, if I'm being honest, I was full judgment. Like, how can you be doing that to your body?
Yeah.
Like, that is ruining your body, right? And I'd always still not avoid him, but I would always be like, oh man, I can't believe you. In my own head, I would never say it. In my own head, I'd just be like, oh, how did you just finish that large pizza or that garlic bread? And I'm like, that is, you're already overweight. Why are you doing this? And I sat with him one day at dinner, and I started chatting to him because I was just wanted to ask him a few questions. I could understand that no one really chatted to him too much at work, and I was like, well, I think there's something else going on. And I found out that his mum and dad and sister died in a car crash when he was 15 years old, and he was raised by his auntie and uncle. And he was like, that's when it started. That's when I started eating, because eating made me feel good in a time that I was going through so much pain and suffering and sadness. When he started eating, it was the only thing that started making him feel good.
Yeah.
And he openly said that to me. He was like, this is what happened. This is what eating makes me feel like. And I was like, in my head, I just said, I get it.
Yeah.
Like, I understand that, like, I know why. It's not just eating for you.
No.
It's your safe place.
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone's story is so different. And you can think you know what's happening and have no idea what's kind of underneath.
It's crazy.
So crazy.
If you could go back to a time in your life, where would you go and why?
Time in my life. I went on a holiday to Greece a few years ago, and
Where'd you go?
we went to a little island called Kithra.
Yep.
Which like nobody knows of unless you're from there. And I just felt so at peace. I was with my family. I was with like family friends, just relaxed in one of like the most beautiful, authentic places I've ever been. And I'm like, I could be happy here for the rest of my life.
We could retire here.
Yeah, very happy
Be
here.
Happy. Yeah.
Very happy here.
Yeah, I love that. I'm actually going back to Greece this year, so just be good.
Jealous.
Again, thank you so much for coming on today. I know a lot of my audience and a lot of the guests have come on grew up in environments where emotions weren't talked about. Sort of their emotions weren't valid. So, you know, this whole podcast and one of the main things is trying to break that cycle, and not only with young kids but also with adults and parents, trying to break that cycle of validating emotions and being okay with talking about emotions. So thank you so much for coming on today, with all the work that you're doing, for sharing all your insights, and it's been amazing sort of catching up after so long.
I know, ages.
Yeah.
But no, thank you for having me. It was a challenge to sit here. I feel like I've still got so many things in my head. I'm like, why didn't I say this? I could have said this.
We can keep going.
No, please don't. But no, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me and
That's
starting the conversation.
That's right. No worries. Thanks so much for listening to another episode of Mind Your Head. If you'd like to support the show, be sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcasts. It really supports the show and helps others discover us. Don't forget to join us on Instagram and TikTok at mindyourhead.podcast.